Well, joining us now, the International Day Against Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking is being marked again with this year's theme, set as People First, Stop Stigma and Discrimination and Strengthen Prevention. Arise correspondent Turaya Farouk will tell us more later. But joining us right now is the Secretary of the Nigerian Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA, Shadrach Haruna. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Shadrach Haruna. Good morning.
Thank you very much, Ruben, and thank you, colleagues in the studio. I'm happy to be here with you this morning.
Thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go straight to this subject. Yesterday was the UN International Day on Drug Abuse and Illicit Trafficking of drugs. Nigeria used to be what they called a transit point. But recent revelations indicate that Nigeria is now a major consumption center for drugs, illicit trafficking in drugs and drug abuse, particularly among the younger population. What went wrong? Considering the fact that the NDLEA has been there for years now, and yet the problem keeps getting worse.
Well, thank you very much for your observation. I want to tell you that Nigeria is not just a consumer nation, it's also a producer nation now. It used to be a transit nation, just like you rightly mentioned, but of course, something happened somewhere. And of course, the quest for quick wealth by so many of our brothers, and the fact that addiction or drug use is something that is social issues with so many people. And the fact of peer pressure and globalization has actually exacerbated some of these issues you mentioned. And that is why you see drugs. And of course, you see, fighting drug is not like fighting criminals. It's like fighting is something that needs a lot of attention, a lot of brain work, and a lot of skills to actually fight. And I think along the line, until recently, that aspect was a little bit not pursued. It was actually left as if it's the normal policing which is done in the fight against drug trafficking and drug use. But of recent, you must have seen that action has been stepped up in the area of enforcement as well as area of rehabilitations. And what you have seen recently is actually bringing to bear the issue of knowledge and expertise in the form of enforcement. Because what is happening now in Nigeria is increasingly becoming a producer nation, particularly methamphetamine and so many others, which we call new psychotropic substances, which are being used everywhere in the country right now. So by what the agency is doing currently is following what we call intelligence-led investigation, which otherwise known as covert operations. And that means we use both human intelligence as well as artificial intelligence to monitor and to get information. And of course, you know, this is not very cheap. It comes very, very, very expensive, but we have to do that. So funding is part of the key elements of success which needs to be done. And of course, capacity is another one. And leadership. You have seen in the last 29 months that the agency has actually stepped up actions. And those actions are being seen in the form of results you see now, currently, with the number of arrests we have recorded, the number of rehabilitations and counseling of drug users. All these are parts of the mandates given to the agency. You agree with me, if you have been following the trend of events, that in the last 29 months, the agency has arrested 31,675 drug offenders. And equally, this includes 35 barons. You know, the attention is not just to drug offenders, but also the barons. Who are those people behind it? Who are these merchants of that? These are the ones who go after, because you need to uproot a tree before you know that tree is killed. But if you're just tending and cleaning the flowers, taking away the leaves, you know, it will still come out again, to sprout very soon. So what the agency is doing now is going after the offenders. And this is being done through our intelligence-led and covert operations, which is yielding a lot of results. We have also convicted, in the same vein, within the same 29 months, 5,145 drug offenders. And that is also to tell you that our court is working and judges are also alive to this issue, because it is not just the responsibility of the executive government alone, but the judiciary, which of course has to prove, which has to show that somebody is guilty before conviction, is also working. The Federal High Court, which has jurisdiction over this matter, is up in the game, and they are really, really working to ensure that the guilty ones are convicted. Then about 11,000 cases are currently pending in court. This is also a result of our intelligence-led type of investigation, which of course shows that, yes, the agency is working to ensure that we take away drugs from the street. Then we have also canceled 25,725 drug users in the last 29 months as well. And that is showing, and then the focus of this year's theme, which is people first, stop stigma and discrimination, and then strengthen prevention.
All right, Mr. Haruna.
What the agency is doing.
I want to ask a question around the theme. So just before you continue, let me just put this in. Perhaps
Yes.
it would form part of your response. The last part of that theme is to strengthen prevention. What you have talked about and what we've seen, or what we often see in the papers, are, you know, arrests, drug busts. So at the very tail end of of drug abuse, where you're catching the perpetrators. But what is the agency doing particularly in strengthening prevention? Yesterday at the event, you talked about the fact that Kwara has the highest prevalence of drug abuse in Nigeria, followed by Nasarawa State, you know, just mapping out the states in Nigeria where drug abuse is prevalent. I'm sure that through your investigations, you must have highlighted the cause of the prevalence. And then number two, how are you preventing it? What's the NDLEA doing?
Well, the big chunk of NDLEA's job is prevention, because we have a department, a directorate called Drug Demand Reduction, and that is to prevent drug use, and that is done by way of sensitization and education. We have a huge program called Unplug Program, which is targeting schools, and we're working with UNODC and some other partners to ensure that teachers are educated on how to handle drug issues in school. And that education is also going around the schools as well. And as part of the prevention is what we do as a sensitization program. And if you listen recently, we have what we call WADA. WADA is War Against Drug Abuse. And this is a very, very strong preventive system which was launched in 2021, and that has really gained traction all over the country. You see that most of our commands, they'll do this sensitization visit to traditional rulers, knowing that the core and the area to target is the grassroots level, the family level, as well as our traditional rulers and faith-based organizations. So many churches now have this program going on as well, and the agency is collaborating with them. So as part of our preventive program is also a way to ensure that we do this drug test we carry out. The drug test is to ensure that it tries to deter people who are coming to employment process. For instance, NDLEA conducted an interview recently, and all those people to be interviewed were actually were made to pass through drug test, integrity test. And that's to tell those ones who are in the universities seeking to come into employment world that if they're on drug, they may not get this job. So I think it's part of the preventive system, but it's not the strongest one we have is WADA, and the sensitization which we also carry out all the time. And recently, on Saturday, last Saturday, we did a walk show with MTN to the market, and we sensitized the market women, market men, and all the workers in the market as well. And I think it was a very huge success because the messages were given out in Hausa, in Yoruba, in Igbo, and some other minority languages. And that was very good sensitization. This is something that goes on every day in all our communities with our commanders going to traditional rulers. So this is part of the prevention we have been doing, apart from also doing the enforcement. In fact, we focus more on prevention than enforcement, because our enforcement is the tail end of our product, because we do the prevention. When it fails, then of course we go towards what we call covert operations to identify those who are still selling and those who are trafficking. And then the last one is the enforcement, where we now have to move out to arrest and prosecute. So what you see, which is very sensational to the news all the time, is actually the arrest and seizures of drugs, and then prosecution and conviction. But indeed, prevention is huge, and it's a huge component of our work, because that is where we can show empathy and compassion to the users as well.
Okay. So a couple of things I want to talk about. You make big seizures. Where do all these drugs go? Do they find their way back into the market? Because there have been allegations of once these seizures are made, what happens to all those drugs? Secondly, what's the update on that big Ikorodu bust, if you guys had? We'd like to have updates as regards that, on that big Ikorodu bust you have. And where does all this drug goes when you make the seizures? An update on that Ikorodu situation.
Oh, yes, thank you so much. Where the drug goes, of course, we destroy them. And if you listen and watch very well, in most cases we invite the media men to come to the destruction site. The Ikorodu drugs, which was the cocaine, the huge haul of cocaine, were all destroyed and on the order of the court. And this was witnessed by so many people, including some of our partners, and they were destroyed in Badagry. The case is on, and our prosecutions are going ahead with it. It's not a case that we're taking it lightly, neither is it something, we've not taken any of our cases lightly anyway, because we have huge number of lawyers prosecuting cases, and the case is in court. Of course, you know very well the length it takes to get to prove the guilt of an accused person. We have to go through the whole judicial process. We don't just send people to jail or send them or keep them in incarceration without trial process. So they're undergoing trial process. The drug have been destroyed already because we don't want them to be either to face any threat of being taken by either drug syndicates again. So the allegation that drugs find their way back to the market is something that I don't know how it happens, and I've not seen it happen, because since I joined the NDLEA, I've seen the way the system works and the way the accountability of drug in our exhibit room is something. It's so difficult for anyone to say he wants to take exhibit and take it back to the system. And certainly in the last 29 months.
Let me take you up on that. Drug find their way back into the system. You remember the Abba Kyari case. So if you say you've not seen how it works, you remember the Abba Kyari case. That they said there was a joint where to be able to track a drug dealer, and the next thing, Abba Kyari was brought into the case. How come that happened? So there's always a great level of connivance with people in authority. So I gave you one example, the Abba Kyari case. What will you say about that?
Well, I cannot rule out completely the Abba Kyari's case, and I don't want to go into depth discussion in that case because it's still in court and it's sub judice at this point. But just to tell you that the case was not really NDLEA. The issue was NDLEA actually made the discovery that it was going back to the system to some of our partner, law enforcement agencies. So it is not NDLEA. I'm talking squarely about how NDLEA handled drugs seized from offenders. We don't allow drugs, and we have a system, foolproof system, that drugs immediately seized is highly accounted for by officers. And then from the point of seizure to the point it's taken to court and the condemnation by court to be destroyed, we give accounts of everything. Indeed, on the day of destruction, the judge in the jurisdiction where the drug is being seized and destroyed will also be in attendance to witness that these drugs have actually, the number of drugs forfeited has actually been destroyed. So we have a line, we have a system in place to ensure the accountability of every drug seized at the point of seizure and the point of arrest. But where some other sister agencies are involved, and they have to transfer these drugs to us. And of course, I tell you, because of the money involved, so many people are really out to see that they are also involved in drug control, particularly when it is not even their responsibility. So of course, we don't say no to that, so long as they cooperate with us, because we like that cooperation. We want them to cooperate with us, because what we need is coordination and cooperation to ensure that we rid the street of drugs and we make well. But where some of them want to develop their own how do I put it, some of the corrupt tendencies to say that the drug is taken back to the street again is something that is beyond, and is certainly not NDLEA. because, like I said, I've not seen it happen. And the system I met on ground and the way it has been strengthened for now is something that it will be difficult for an officer of NDLEA to take such drug back to the street.
Well, Mr. Haruna, you've talked about the second leg of the theme for this year, strengthening prevention and the efforts that the agency is making, in that regard. But the theme says people first, stop stigma and discrimination.
Yes.
Now, how much effort has been put into that first part of it, particularly with regard to treatment and rehabilitation? And you're absolutely correct. What we get to see is the sensational, efforts. But how about putting the people first, treatment and rehabilitation, stopping stigma and discrimination? Do you have a system in place in that regard?
Yes. Ruben, I think I can assure you that the system we have in place is actually focused on people. People first, and then we don't allow stigmatization to happen. And of course, I've talked about prevention. And let me give you a very brief distinct towards the way we have a people-centered approach to drug issues. One, I told you that in all our commands, we have rehabilitation center. As a first responder to drug issues, we have rehabilitation and counseling centers where those who are users, you definitely come across users, certainly not just people who are also criminals. Those who are users are being housed there, counseled, and rehabilitated. And sometimes I'll ask them to go back to the society. And those who were found in possession and using drugs will also be counseled first, and then be given an option to stay in the rehabilitation to get free from drug use before they're allowed to go out. But we have also a more robust system where we allow people allow drug-dependent individuals to have access to treatment without being recognized. What I mean by that is we have anonymous 247 telephone helpline where you can call from the comfort of your room, and you can speak any language to any person there, and they'll answer you. And we have had so many people calling in to be counseled. And those whose cases needs further assistance have been referred to rehabilitation home and counseling centers close to where they are as well. If you don't want to come out to go for treatment, yes, we have that procedure and we have that system in place for you. And that's the one we call the helpline, 247 helpline, which is being used and is being called upon. I mean, people call all the time and get counsel. We have psychotherapists, we have psychologists, we have doctors, we have a lot of people in that center. And they are working and counseling people every day on a daily basis. So we think that putting people first is part of what we do as passion and compassion to ensure recovery and treatment for drug use. And I've just given you what we've done across the country in the last 29 months. We have counseled 23,725 drug-dependent individuals, and all of them are free from drugs. And they like our counseling and rehab centers because we have professionals. We have well-dedicated professionals who are doing their work. It's not just arresting, it's not just boots on the ground, following people around to get them arrested and prosecuted. We also counsel them. So the people's first attention or focus, which is a human rights aspect of our work, is well catered for as well. And it's something we do along with the enforcement, and we try to balance the two. So the approach to drug enforcement and drug control is actually balancing beyond drug demand reduction and drug supply reduction.
All right, Mr. Haruna, let's talk about collaborations. So in your efforts to also preventing stigmatization and discrimination, you must work with private organizations, schools. In your submission, the Niger State Command of NDLEA has said that schools in Niger State had what we call the drug club. It would be nice for you to just give us a bit more detail on that. Perhaps others can also borrow relief from that, because when you talk about prevention, you must catch them young. We hear that in a number of schools, secondary school students, and perhaps even younger, are hooked on drugs in Nigeria. So it'd be great to hear. And then, partnerships. Yesterday, you partnered with MTN Foundation to deliver some of your initiatives. Also, we have the Freedom Foundation who are doing a great work. So what are some of those partnerships that you have, and how can you deepen that in the private sector and in schools in particular?
Well, thank you. I think partnership is key to this war because it's a common and shared responsibility. And what I mean by that is that everyone should be involved. And we have cultivated that partnership with schools, like you mentioned, in the higher institutions. We have drug-free clubs in the universities. We have drug clubs in NYSC camp, as well as NYSC in their community development projects. We also have private organizations partnering with us. So many CSOs are partnering with us. And we love this collaboration. Indeed, we have our own what we call all-purpose committee, which comprises of people who are stakeholders, individuals, well-meaning individuals, not even working in any organization, who have agreed to work with us. And they come on, they give us feedback on what we do. They also support us in carrying out this sensitization in the various areas of sphere of influences. And we also work with other agencies, like I mentioned before, sister agencies like NAPTIP, police, immigration, customs. So we do a lot of coordination with them. And of course, our international partners are also at hand to help all the time. You mentioned other corporate organizations coming to work with us. Yes, indeed. MTN has shown a great deal of commitment and corporate responsibility in doing this work. We are also calling on other corporate organizations to come because we need them. And MTN has also indicated that our 24/7 call center, which is where we counsel and rehabilitate and counsel drug users, they also want to join NDLEA to ensure that we expand the facilities there to accommodate more people coming in, and even to have calling centers in the sense where the people can actually walk in, to see, well, yes, I want to be helped, I want to be rehabilitated, I want to be treated. But right now what we have is you can call from anywhere. You don't need to give your name, you don't need to show who you are, and then you come in, and then counselors will give your case to a case officer who will handle it with you.
Okay.
So we develop partnership a lot, and that partnership is key to our success currently.
Real quickly, there's a big problem going on in Nigeria: spousal drug use and drug abuse. There are many people that are living in a home with their spouse. They don't know their spouse is on drugs. What are the signs for us to quickly identify a husband in the house or a wife that is using drugs? This, you will say, will save a lot of families.
Well, there's so many telltale signs, because if you look at it, a typical person, a typical child in a home using drugs, you see how the person will now get himself isolated, stay in his room. He will hardly come out when the family members are having their dinner. He will not join them in anything. He will not come out to watch news anymore. He stays in his room. In fact, if your child started exhibiting that particular traits, you have to watch out. And what we want you to do at that point is to see how you can work with him or her and try to subject her to probably treatment. At that point, we want you to show empathy if you started seeing those signs. In the same way with your spouse. It could be your wife, it could be your husband, but what you have to do is to notice if you start seeing some withdrawal behavior in terms of socializing with you, or staying with the family members, or going out, sneaking out, or doing certain things which you don't know, of course, you should suspect that. And in most cases, they have this mood swing as well, which is a very, very good telltale sign. A user will have a mood swing. Once in a while, you see how he just snapped and do what you don't expect from him or her. You see it happen. So these are some of the telltale signs. And then, of course, if you know it is not something to quarrel, it's not something for you to be harsh on that individual, but try to show how you can agree and decide and discuss with him or her to seek treatment, and at that point, you can actually come out of it. And that is why we emphasize on this drug treatment, drug test kits in a home. You need to have these drug test kits, which NDLEA has produced. Very effective. It can detect about 11 types of drugs. And when you do that test, it's a very quick test. Within 5 minutes you get the result. And that will tell you. And if anybody is involved and has drug in his system and is detected early, the likelihood is that that person can come out of it by way of counseling and rehabilitation.
Thank you very much for your time this morning, Mr. Shadrach Haruna, Secretary, National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA.